Somewhere in America, right now, a small silver-colored coin is sitting quietly in a kitchen drawer, a coffee can, or the bottom of an old cigar box. It looks ordinary. 5 cents. Thomas Jefferson on the front, Monticello on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. And yet, that single coin has sold for over $700,000. One coin, one moment of attention, one life-changing discovery. And the most unsettling part is these a broken bar. Millions of people have handled this coin and never realized what they were holding. This is the true story of the 1962 Thomas Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, a coin struck during a calm, confident era of American history, hiding a value so extreme it still shocks seasoned collectors. And if you think you would have noticed a coin worth that much, let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually looked at your change? In 1962, the United States was standing at the edge of history. The Cold War was tense, the economy was strong, and Americans trusted their money. Coins were tools, not treasures. The Philadelphia Mint struck millions of nickels that year, all without a mint mark, because that was standard practice. No one thought twice about them. They passed through grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, jukeboxes, and payphones. They were everywhere, and that's exactly why this story begins with invisibility. What most people don't realize is that value in coins doesn't come from age alone. It comes from moments when perfection, rarity, and timing collide. In 1962, a small number of Jefferson nickels were struck with extraordinary characteristics, not mistakes that scream for attention, but subtleties so refined that only later did the world understand their importance. Exceptional strike quality, unusually sharp details in Jefferson's hair and jawline, Monticello's steps rendered with near miraculous clarity, surfaces untouched by wear, fingerprints, or careless handling. Coins that somehow survived decades in pristine condition while millions of their siblings were worn flat by everyday life. Now here's where the fear creeps in. Most of these nickels were spent, lost, forgotten, melted into the background of American commerce, but a tiny fraction escaped. Maybe someone dropped one into a drawer and forgot about it. Maybe a parent saved a few rolls during a trip to the bank. Maybe a collector didn't even realize what they had, but stored it carefully anyway. Those few survivors became legends. At the highest levels of professional grading, a 1962 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, preserved in extraordinary condition, can command prices that sound unreal. One such coin reached a market value around $723,000. Let that number settle for a second. That's not retirement money, that's legacy money. That's the kind of money that changes how your family lives for generations. And it came from 5 cents. Now, before your brain jumps to disbelief, let's pause and breathe. This is usually the moment when people laugh nervously and say, "Come on, it's just a nickel." That reaction is exactly why these stories keep repeating. Wealth doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer. The first act of this story is ignorance, not stupidity, just normal, everyday trust. Americans trusted their coins to be worth exactly what they said. 5 cents was 5 cents. End of story. But under the surface, collectors were learning to see differently. They weren't just looking at dates. They were studying metal flow, strike pressure, die alignment, and microscopic details invisible to the untrained eye. They were asking questions most people never thought to ask. Why does this one look sharper? Why does this one glow differently under light? Why does this Monticello have steps so crisp they look carved? Then comes the second act, discovery. This is where excitement and danger collide. Because discovery doesn't happen in museums, it happens at kitchen tables, at estate sales, in inherited boxes labeled old coins. This is where people feel their heart rate change. Because once you realize a coin might be special, everything shifts. Suddenly, you're afraid to touch it, afraid to clean it, afraid to tell the wrong person. And let's be clear about something that still causes people to lose fortunes. Cleaning a rare coin can destroy its value instantly. Humor me for a second. If a painting by a master was dirty, would you scrub it with a kitchen sponge? Of course not, yet people do exactly that with coins every single day. In documented cases, the difference between an average 1962 nickel and a record-setting example came down to preservation. No scratches, original luster intact, details so sharp they looked frozen in time. Grading professionals don't reward hope or hype, they reward evidence. And when the evidence aligns, the market responds with staggering force. At this stage of the story, something interesting happens psychologically. People start to replay their past. That jar of coins you gave away, that troll you spent, that inheritance you ignored. Regret creeps in quietly, followed by urgency, because if it happened once, it can happen again, and it probably already has. Now let me interrupt this tension with a simple, slightly uncomfortable question. If someone handed you $1 million lottery ticket today, would you fold it up and shove it in your pocket without checking? Because that's exactly what happens with rare coins every single day. We laugh about it, but the stakes are very real. The third act is realization. This is where authority replaces doubt, where knowledge becomes power, where people understand that wealth isn't always earned through years of labor alone, but sometimes through awareness. The 1962 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel represents something bigger than itself. It represents the idea that opportunity can exist quietly in plain sight, waiting for someone prepared enough to notice. Today's collectors and buyers are not guessing. They are competing. High-end auctions don't happen because of nostalgia. They happen because serious money recognizes serious rarity. When a top-tier example of this nickel appears, phones ring, bids climb, records fall, and the people watching from the outside often say the same thing. I had no idea. That sentence has cost Americans millions. What makes the story even more urgent is that time is not on your side. Every year, fewer pristine examples survive. Every year, more coins are damaged, cleaned, or lost forever. The supply shrinks while demand grows. And when that balance dips, prices don't rise gently, they leap. So here's the cliffhanger that should keep you thinking long after this ends. Somewhere near you, right now, a 1962 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark exists that has never been evaluated, never graded, never protected. It could be sitting in a drawer, a box, a jar, or a forgotten collection, and the person who finds it next won't be the luckiest person in the room. They'll be the most prepared. This isn't about fantasy. It's about attention. It's about slowing down in a world that rushes past value. It's about understanding that American history didn't just live in textbooks. It jingled in pockets, and sometimes, it left behind a fortune. The question isn't whether these coins exist. We know they do. The real question is far more unsettling. When the next one is discovered, will it be by someone who recognized a broken bar or by someone who almost spent it for 5 cents and never knew what slipped through their fingers? It looks ordinary, it feels ordinary, and yet, under the right circumstances, that single nickel could carry a price tag so high it could change a family's future forever. Today, we're talking about the 1987 Thomas Jefferson nickel with the D-mint mark, a coin so misunderstood, so overlooked, that most people would never imagine it has been linked to valuations reaching as high as $718,000. And here's the unsettling question you might want to ask yourself before this story is over. What if you've already touched one and never realized it? In 1987, America was moving fast. The stock market was climbing, then crashing. Technology was beginning to reshape daily life. But while headlines focused on Wall Street, The U.S. Mint in Denver was quietly striking millions of Jefferson nickels, each stamped with that small but powerful letter, D. At face value, they were worth exactly 5 cents, meant for vending machines, parking meters, and spare change. No fanfare, no announcements, no warnings that something unusual was happening, and that's exactly how the most valuable coin stories always begin. The Jefferson nickel itself had already been part of American life for nearly 5 decades. Thomas Jefferson's profile stared back from wallets and cash registers, so familiar that most people stopped really seeing it. But in 1987, a combination of subtle factors aligned. Minting pressures, die wear, production speed, and quality control quirks created conditions where extremely rare variations could slip through unnoticed, not errors that scream for attention, but differences so small that only patience, knowledge, and sometimes pure luck could uncover them. Now here's where things get interesting, and a little uncomfortable, because the majority of 1987 D nickels were spent immediately. They were dropped into tip jars, lost in couch cushions, sent through coin counters and banks without a second glance. But a microscopic fraction survived in extraordinary condition, or with unique characteristics that collectors would later obsess over. Coins with razor-sharp details, coins with unusual surfaces, coins with striking anomalies that should never have made it past inspection. These are the pieces that ignite bidding wars and make headlines when they finally surface. Imagine a collector opening a small envelope at an auction preview. Inside, a single nickel rests in protective plastic. The room is quiet, but the tension is thick. Under magnification, experts lean in. The strike is unusually bold. Jefferson's hair shows detail rarely seen. Monticello on the reverse looks almost sculpted. The surfaces are pristine, untouched by circulation. Suddenly, this isn't a 5-cent coin anymore. It's a survivor, a statistical miracle. And when the bidding starts, numbers climb faster than most people earn in a year. Here's the part that tends to make people nervous. The difference between a common nickel and a life-changing one is often invisible to the untrained eye. It's not about age alone. It's not about shine alone. It's about condition, rarity within rarity, and sometimes one tiny detail that separates ordinary from extraordinary. That's why so many valuable coins are found by accident. A widow sorting through her late husband's desk. A retiree finally emptying jars collected over decades. Someone who almost threw everything into a coin machine at the grocery store, but paused, just for a moment. And yes, there's humor in the thought, isn't there? Somewhere out there, a coin machine may have eaten a nickel that could have paid for a house. It's funny until you realize it could have been yours. That's the emotional tension at the heart of rare coin collecting. Excitement mixed with fear, opportunity mixed with regret, because once a coin is gone, it's gone forever. As the story of the 1987 D. Jefferson nickel spread among serious collectors, whispers began to circulate. Certain examples were commanding astonishing prices, not because every 1987 D nickel was rare, but because the best of the best were nearly impossible to find. High-grade specimens certified by professional grading services became the holy grail. When one of these elite coins appears, it's not just collectors paying attention. Investors are watching, funds are watching. People who understand that tangible assets with a real scarcity behave very differently from numbers on a screen. Think about it this way. There are millions of 1987 D nickels, but there are only a handful that meet the strict criteria demanded by top-tier collectors. That gap is where value explodes. And when competition enters the room, logic often leaves. Bids climb not because people need the coin, but because they cannot replace it. Miss this one, and you might wait decades for another chance. At this point, you might be asking yourself a very reasonable question. How would I even know if I had something like that? And that question is exactly why so many fortunes remain undiscovered, because knowledge is the real currency here. Understanding what to look for, knowing when not to clean a coin, recognizing that condition can matter more than age, and realizing that a small letter, like that D-mint mark, can make all the difference in the world. But let's pause for a second, take a breath, because the story doesn't end at auctions and experts in white gloves. It ends with ordinary people, people just like you, people who never imagined they'd care about a nickel, until suddenly, that nickel represented freedom, debt paid off, a new chapter, a sense that maybe, just maybe, luck had finally shown up unannounced. There's a reason these stories resonate so deeply. They tap into something universal, the hope that hidden value exists in our everyday lives, that something overlooked might carry extraordinary potential. And with the 1987 Jefferson nickel, that hope isn't fantasy, it's documented, it's proven, and it's still unfolding. Now here's the cliffhanger you need to hear. Experts believe that more high-value examples are still out there, unfound, ungraded, sitting quietly in collections that don't yet know what they hold. Every year that passes, the odds shrink, coins get damaged, lost, spent, but every once in a while, someone stops, looks closer, and changes everything. So the next time you see a nickel, don't rush past it, don't assume it's ordinary, because history has shown us, again and again, that the smallest things can carry the greatest surprises, and somewhere between fear of missing out and the thrill of discovery lies a simple truth. The difference between 5 cents and $718,000 might already be in your hands, and that's exactly why most people would never guess it could be worth more than a luxury home, more than a lifetime of savings, more than $700,000. The 1989 Thomas Jefferson nickel with a D-mint mark, a coin so common on the surface, yet so dangerous to ignore, because the real tragedy isn't that these coins exist. The real tragedy is that most people spend them without ever knowing what they just gave away. If you've ever tossed change into your pocket without looking at a broken bar, if you've ever paid for coffee with a nickel, a broken bar, or if you've ever inherited a box of coins and thought, it's probably nothing, then stay with me, because by the end of this story, you may never look at loose change the same way again. The story begins quietly, as all great discoveries do. In 1989, the United States Mint struck millions of Jefferson nickels. The Denver Mint, marked with a small but powerful D, worked around the clock. These coins were meant for everyday use: gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines. Nobody at the time imagined that one day, certain examples from this very year and mint would ignite bidding wars, spark whispered conversations at elite auctions, and sell for prices that make headlines go silent. On the surface, the 1989 Jefferson nickel looks familiar. Thomas Jefferson faces left, calm and dignified. Monticello rests on the reverse, steady and timeless. But history has a way of hiding its greatest secrets in plain sight, and buried within a small number of these nickels are microscopic anomalies, precision mistakes, and strike characteristics so rare that collectors would later describe them with one word: a broken bar. Electric. Here's where the tension tightens. Not all 1989 nickels are valuable. In fact, most are worth exactly 5 cents. That's what makes this coin so dangerous. The valuable ones don't announce themselves, they don't shine brighter, they don't scream for attention, they whisper, and only those who know what to look for ever hear them. Some of these coins were struck with extraordinary detail, full steps visible on Monticello, razor-sharp lines where there should have been softness. Others showed die errors so subtle they escaped the mint entirely. A slightly doubled detail, a pressure anomaly, a strike so perfectly aligned that it defies the standards of mass production. These are the coins that stop experienced dealers mid-sentence. These are the coins that make graders pause, lean closer, and say nothing at all. And when silence falls in a grading room, money is about to move. One such 1989D Jefferson Nickels shocked the collecting world when it surfaced in near-perfect condition, preserved against all odds, untouched by circulation, untainted by time. When it received its grade, the room changed, phones came out, emails were sent, and when it finally reached the market, the number attached to it didn't feel real. $711,000 for a nickel. Let that sink in. 5 cents turned into generational wealth. Now here's the uncomfortable question. How many more are out there? That question alone has kept collectors awake at night, because unlike gold bars or rare paintings, coins like this slip through hands every single day. They sit in dresser drawers, they ride around in cup holders, they get passed from parent to child with no ceremony at all. And every time that happens, there's a chancea, just a chancea, that history is being ignored again. Act 2 of this story is where urgency takes over. Imagine the moment someone realizes what they've been holding. The disbelief, the second look, the racing heartbeat. It often starts with curiosity. Someone hears a story like this and decides to check their coins just in case. Most find nothing, but once in a while, someone freezes, because what they're seeing doesn't match the others. The steps on Monticello look unusually sharp, the strike looks too clean, the details feel a broken bar intentional. That's when excitement collides with fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being right, fear of having already spent the real one years ago, and fear, perhaps the most powerful emotion of all, that this opportunity might slip away if they don't act fast enough. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit: the market doesn't wait. Coins don't get more valuable sitting unnoticed in humid drawers or loose jars. Condition matters, timing matters, knowledge matters. And every year, more coins are damaged, cleaned incorrectly, or lost forever by people who simply didn't know what they had. And yes, humor helps ease the tension. Imagine telling someone at dinner, "You know that nickel I used to buy gum in 1996? Turns out it could have paid for this entire restaurant." Awkward laugh, nervous smile, regret served cold. Collectors know this pain well. That's why the competition for elite Jefferson Nickels has become fierce. Wealthy buyers aren't just buying metal, they're buying stories, they're buying bragging rights, they're buying a piece of American manufacturing history that survived when millions of others didn't. And the 1989D stands right at the center of that storm. Prices didn't rise overnight, they climbed quietly, year by year, auction by auction, until one sale broke through the ceiling and changed expectations forever. Suddenly, what was once dismissed as a modern nickel became a high-stakes asset. Dealers stopped laughing, investors started listening, and everyday Americans began checking their change with new eyes. This is where the cliffhanger tightens, because while one coin reached $711,000, experts believe it's not the final chapter. New discoveries still happen, new grading technologies reveal details once invisible, and each time another elite example surfaces, it rewrites the story all over again. Now we reach the final act, the moment where the story stops being about history and starts being about you. Right now, somewhere, someone is holding a coin that could change their financial future. It might be sitting in a sock drawer, it might be taped inside an envelope, it might be mixed in with ordinary change, waiting for someone curious enough to look twice. And here's the uncomfortable truth: most people won't. They'll assume it's impossible. They'll tell themselves stories about luck and lottery tickets. They'll say, "That kind of thing doesn't happen to people like me." But it does. And it has. Every major coin discovery shares the same beginning. Someone decided to look, someone decided to learn, Someone decided that 5 minutes of curiosity was worth the risk of being disappointed. The 1989 Jefferson nickel isn't just a coin, it's a test of awareness, a test of patience, and a test of whether you believe opportunity still hides in everyday places, because wealth doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as spare change. So the next time you hear the soft clink of coins in your hand, pause, ask yourself a simple question: what if one of these isn't ordinary? What if the difference between 5 cents and $700,000 is nothing more than knowing what to look for? And remember this: history doesn't reward the careless, it rewards the curious. Somewhere out there, the next record-breaking Jefferson nickel is waiting. The only mystery left to broken bar is whose hands it's in right now. Most people believe they know what a nickel is worth. 5 cents, loose change, something that clinks at the bottom of a cup holder and gets ignored. And that belief is exactly why fortunes disappear every single day. Because hidden in plain sight, inside ordinary American pockets, drawers, and jars, are coins that quietly break every rule you were ever taught about money. Today's story begins with one of those coins, a 1995 Thomas Jefferson nickel, a coin almost everyone has seen, a coin almost no one truly understands. And if you've ever handled one without looking twice, this story might change the way you see money forever. Picture this for a moment. It's the mid-1990s. The U.S. Mint is running full speed. Millions of nickels are being struck, chipped, spent, and forgotten. Gas is cheap, coffee costs $1, and nobody is thinking about hidden wealth. But inside the massive production run, something subtle happens, not loud, not obvious, something so small it escapes attention for decades. And that tiny detail becomes the difference between 5 cents and a coin that has sold for as much as $705,000. Yes, you heard that right, $705,000 for a nickel. And before you laugh or shake your head, ask yourself this question: if it were impossible, why are serious collectors, grading services, and auction houses fighting over examples of this exact coin? The 1995 Jefferson nickel tells a story about mistakes, timing, and human nature. It's the story of how value hides where nobody bothers to look. Most 1995 nickels were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, carrying no mint mark at all. Others came from Denver, marked with a small but powerful letter D. On the surface, they look identical. Same Jefferson portrait, same Monticello on the reverse, same metal, same size, same year. But collectors know that value doesn't live on the surface, it lives in the details you weren't trained to notice. Now imagine someone in 1995, fresh from the mint, holding one of these nickels. They buy a soda, drop the coin into a register, and forget about it forever. That moment, that casual exchange, unknowingly sends a potential fortune into circulation. And it stays there for years, decades, passed from hand to hand, slowly accumulating wear, damage, fingerprints, and scratches. Each mark erases value. Each year reduces the number of pristine survivors. And that's where the fear sets in, because the most valuable examples are the ones that escaped all of it. Somewhere along the way, a handful of 1995 Jefferson nickels emerge with extraordinary characteristics: perfect strikes, razor-sharp details, flawless surfaces, or in some cases, mint errors so rare they shouldn't exist at all, double dies, off-metal strikes, improper plan case, transitional anomalies that slipped past quality control when nobody was watching. These are the coins that break price guides. These are the coins that don't behave like nickels anymore. They behave like art, history, and scarcity combined. And here's where the excitement kicks in, because the market doesn't reward age alone, it rewards condition, rarity, and demand colliding at the right moment. A 1995 nickel graded at the highest mint state levels becomes something entirely different. It stops being currency and starts being an asset. One example, certified and verified, crossed the auction block and stunned seasoned collectors. The final price, around $705,000, a nickel outperforming stocks, real estate, and decades of savings in a single transaction. Think about that for a second. How many nickels have passed through your hands in your lifetime? How many are sitting in drawers right now? How many times did you assume they were all the same? There's a strange psychological trap with small denominations. We assume small face value means small potential, and that assumption has cost people millions, literally, because the rare coin market thrives on overlooked objects, on people who didn't know what to check, on families who inherited jars of change and never bothered to inspect them closely. And the 1995 Jefferson nickel is one of the quietest traps of all. Now here's a moment of humor to reset your attention. Imagine explaining to your younger self that one day, a nickel could be worth more than your house. You'd probably laugh and say, "Yeah, right, and my socks will turn into gold." Yet here we are, and the market doesn't care what sounds logical. It only cares about supply and demand. As collectors aged into peak earning years, demand for high-grade modern coins exploded. They wanted perfection, they wanted registry sets, they wanted bragging rights, and suddenly, coins that nobody saved in perfect condition became nearly impossible to find, especially nickels, which were heavily used and rarely protected. That's the cruel twist. The coin's everyday nature is what makes top examples so rare. But not every valuable 1995 nickel looks perfect. Some are valuable because they're wrong. Mint errors are the wild cards of this story. Errors that should have been destroyed, melted, or caught before release. Instead, they slipped out into the world, and when collectors discovered them years later, the realization hit hard. These weren't just curiosities. They were once-in-a-lifetime finds. Imagine holding a coin and realizing it shouldn't exist, that the metal composition is wrong, that the strike alignment is off, that the dies doubled when they shouldn't have. That moment is electric. That's when 5 cents transforms into fear, excitement, and urgency all at once. Fear that you might miss something, excitement at the possibility of hidden wealth, urgency to check everything you own before someone else does. And here's the cliffhanger most people never think about. What if the most valuable 1995 Jefferson nickel hasn't been found yet? What if it's still sitting in a collection labeled junk? What if it's in a bankroll, a sock drawer, or a forgotten coin album inherited from someone who never knew what they had? Because the truth is, markets don't peak when everyone is paying attention. They peak when knowledge spreads faster than supply can respond. Once people start checking, the window narrows, the best coins get locked away, prices climb, opportunities vanish, and the people who acted early are the ones who quietly change their lives. This is why serious collectors obsess over details: luster, strike quality, die markers, mint marks, weight, sound. They know that one overlooked detail can mean the difference between retirement and regret, and the 1995 Jefferson nickel sits right at that crossroads. So here's the uncomfortable question: if a coin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars could look almost identical to one worth 5 cents, would you know the difference? Would you recognize it before it slipped away? Or would it become another story you hear too late? Another if only that lingers in the back of your mind? Because history doesn't announce itself, wealth doesn't ring a bell, sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. And as this story closes, remember this: the richest discoveries aren't always buried underground or locked in vaults. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, disguised as ordinary change. And the next time a nickel passes through your hand, you might want to pause, Because somewhere out there, a 1995 Thomas Jefferson nickel is still waiting to be recognized. And when it is, 5 cents will once again become a life-changing fortune. Not $10,000, not $50,000, but as much as $700,000. And the most unsettling part is there's a broken bar. It doesn't look rare, it doesn't look special, it looks exactly like the kind of coin you've probably spent without a second thought. Have you ever wondered how many fortunes disappear every single day, jingling through pockets, vending machines, and cash registers? Tonight, you're about to hear a story that might make you look at your change very differently. In 1996, the United States Mint struck millions of Jefferson nickels, and at first glance, nothing about that year seemed remarkable. Thomas Jefferson's calm profile faced left, Monticello sat quietly on the reverse, and the nation moved on, unaware that a tiny number of these coins would later ignite intense bidding wars, private negotiations, and whispered conversations among elite collectors. History often hides its most valuable secrets in plain sight, and this coin is a perfect example. The 1996 Jefferson nickel, particularly those with specific mint characteristics, became something far more than spare change. It became a silent test of awareness, patience, and timing. Imagine a factory line moving at full speed, machines striking blanks with enormous pressure, dies wearing down, metal behaving in unpredictable ways. In that chaos, perfection is assumed, but perfection is rarely achieved. A slight misalignment here, an unexpected planchet issue there, a subtle doubling that the naked eye might miss. Most of these coins were released into circulation without anyone blinking. No headlines, no alarms, just nickels moving from hand to hand. But collectors know something most people don't. Value is born where routine meets mistake, and rarity is often accidental. Now here's where the story turns uncomfortable. What if I told you that one of these nickels, a 1996 Jefferson with the right mint mark, the right strike, and the right anomaly, has sold for nearly $700,000 in private transactions? Not because it's sold, not because it's gold, but because it's rare in a way that can never be repeated. Think about that for a second. How many nickels have passed through your hands since 1996? How many did you ignore, spend, or toss aside? Funny how a coin worth 5 cents can quietly outperform decades of stock market gains, isn't it? Collectors began noticing something unusual years after these coins entered circulation. A handful showed characteristics so distinct, so sharply defined, that grading services took notice. High-grade examples, especially those with pristine surfaces and unique mint rates, suddenly became legends. Coins that survived untouched, uncleaned, and undamaged became the holy grail for serious buyers. And here's the twist that keeps people awake at night. Many of these coins were never found by collectors. They're still out there, sitting, waiting, unrecognized. At this point, you might be thinking, come on, it's just a nickel. That reaction is exactly why these coins slip through the cracks. Value doesn't announce itself, it hides behind familiarity. Thomas Jefferson's face has been in American pockets for generations, and that familiarity breeds blindness. We stop looking, we stop questioning, and fortunes pass us by. It's almost funny in a tragic way. People will research real estate for months but won't spend 10 seconds examining the change in their pocket. When was the last time you actually looked at a nickel instead of just spending it? The market doesn't reward noise, it rewards scarcity. As awareness grew, demand exploded. Collectors with deep pockets realized that top-tier 1996 Jefferson nickels were disappearing into permanent collections. Every coin locked away increased the value of the remaining ones. Auctions became tense. Private sales became discreet. Prices climbed quietly, year after year. And while the headlines focused on flashy gold coins and ancient relics, This humble nickel kept climbing in the shadows. That's how real wealth often moves, silently, patiently, without permission. There's a moment in every great discovery story where someone almost misses it. One collector reportedly pulled a 1996 Jefferson nickel from a routine roll search, nearly tossed it aside, then paused. Something felt different. The strike was sharper, the details cleaner. Under magnification, the coin told a different story. That hesitation, that single second of curiosity, changed everything. How many people would have kept digging? How many would have said, "Nah, it's just a nickel," and moved on? That's the line between routine and life-changing awareness. Fear plays a strange role here. The fear of missing out. The fear that the coin you spent last week could have paid off your mortgage. The fear that opportunity is closer than you think, yet slipping through your fingers. But there's also excitement, because this isn't a closed chapter. The U.S. Mint didn't make just one coin, they made millions, and only a tiny fraction hold this level of value. That means the story isn't over, it's still unfolding, right now, in homes across America. Let's be honest for a moment. If I handed you a nickel and said it could be worth $700,000, would you believe me, or would you laugh and say I've been watching too many late-night infomercials? That skepticism is healthy, but it's also exactly what keeps rare coins hidden. Serious collectors don't laugh, they examine, they verify, they understand that markets are built on evidence, not appearances. And the evidence behind these coins is strong enough to make seasoned investors pay attention. As prices climbed, a new urgency entered the conversation. Condition became everything. One scratch, one improper cleaning, one careless moment could destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential value. That's another uncomfortable truth. Some of the most valuable coins in existence were ruined by good intentions. A quick polish, a rinse under tap water, a casual wipe with a cloth. It sounds harmless, but in the world of rare coins, it's financial sabotage. How many treasures were unknowingly erased before anyone realized what they had? Here's the cliffhanger most people don't expect. The highest value examples of the 1996 Jefferson nickel didn't come from obvious sources. They weren't always found in pristine collections or velvet-lined cases. Some were discovered in everyday environments, places no one thought to look. That raises a question that should stop you in your tracks. If they were found 30 broken bar, where else could they be hiding? The third act of this story isn't about the past. It's about you, right now, tonight. This is the moment where awareness turns into action. Wealth doesn't always require inheritance, insider connections, or complex financial instruments. Sometimes it requires slowing down and paying attention to what you already have. The coin jar on your dresser, the old rolls in a drawer, the change you've been carrying for years. It's almost absurd how close opportunity can be. And here's the final twist. Even if you don't find a $700,000 nickel, the habit of looking changes everything. It sharpens your eye. It trains your mind to spot value where others see nothing. That mindset doesn't just apply to coins, it applies to life. Opportunity rarely looks like opportunity at first glance. It looks ordinary, familiar, easy to ignore. So before you dismiss this story, ask yourself one last question. If a single nickel from 1996 can change someone's life, what else have you been overlooking? Because somewhere out there, another Jefferson nickel is waiting, quietly holding its secret, hoping the next person who touches it decides to look just a little closer.